Hello. In this video, I will go over the second part for case 2. So here I already have the file, mainly the one that we created for the first part, where we did this kind of data cleaning so that we can come up with the total cost and get information about the total raw material cost in US dollars and the total production cost, as well as the total labor cost. Next, what I will do, I will show you how we computed all of these KPIs. And then after we are done from this, I will analyze KPI 1, and then I will show you the analysis for the other KPIs, because it's technically the same for all of these KPIs. So the first KPI that we talked about in class was the output KPI, which is mainly how many pounds of release ease are produced on a daily basis. Now this information here, we have it in this column production, which is in pounds. Now all I'm gonna do is just bring the information to this column. Again, I could have left it here, but I just want to make sure that I'm labeling my KPI so it's easier for me to identify them later on for analysis. The second KPI that we looked at is the raw material cost, which is something we also calculated in the previous part, which is mainly this total raw material cost, and it's in US dollars. Technically, that is the raw material in pounds multiplied by the cost per 1 pound, and that's in local currency. And to make it in dollars, we multiply by the exchange rate to get this total raw material cost. So I'm going to also bring the information from total raw material cost to the raw material cost here as well. The third KPI is output per worker. So technically we know the output here on a daily basis, but that output is for the whole plant, for all of the workers, or done by all of the workers. Here I'm actually starting from below. So all I need to do is just, I'm not sure why my video was in the middle, but it's the same thing. Technically here, let me repeat this. This is the same as the total cost. Here we go, L2. And then the third one is, as we mentioned, is the output per worker. So that's the output for all workers divided by the number of workers. That gives us the output per worker. The total cost per 100 pounds, that's technically something similar to this, but remember that this is total cost for all of these pounds that we produced. So if we want it to be by per 100, first of all, we can, if you want to compute the total cost per 1 pound, which is the total cost divided by production or output, it's the same. And that number will give that cost per 1 pound. But if we want it per 100 pounds, then we just multiply it by 100. And the last one is the yield, KPI 5. That mainly tells us how many, like in terms of raw material, how many we actually ended up like utilizing for production. So that would be the output divided by the input, or the production, which is how many pounds of release is produced, divided by the raw material. That gives us this percentage here, or 94% of raw material being utilized as in the final product. All right, so we have all of these 5 KPIs. As I mentioned, I'm going to focus on analyzing KPI 1. The other KPI analysis will be similar. Now, to analyze this, we want to understand the production per plant, and we want to see how things are changing over the year. So there's 2 criteria here we are using to slice and dice our KPI, right? So that's our numerical value or variable. We want to see how this actually is divided by plant and over the year. So I will create a pivot table to do this kind of analysis, because it will, that will give me a cross tabulation of what I'm interested in. So the first thing that I want is I'm interested in analyzing KPI 1, so I can just bring it here. We're looking at the average KPI, so sometimes we are interested in total KPI, like total output or total sales or whatever, but in this case, in the case itself, we were asked to create the average KPI, so we can update this. Sometimes my computer is slow when I'm recording, so technically, here we go. So I needed to change that to average to make sure that this is average, and then I want to slice it by plant, so that will tell me for each of these plants what was the average output. When we say average output, so for Frankfurt, over the whole year of 2013, which is the data that we have, it's just in 2013, the average output was 104,143 pounds. The same goes for the rest, but here, this is the overall average for Applicum, or for all of these plants. Now, in the same time, we want to see how we can slice this number and see how things are changing over different months of the year. So I'll grab month from column, and now I can see the how things are changing over the year for each of these plants. All right, so as we mentioned in class, in order to actually analyze this KPI, sometimes it's helpful to visualize it because we can see better what's happening. So I'm just gonna grab the information without these two grand totals, and paste it in here. And I'm gonna, for representation purposes, I'm gonna switch these to month, and then I can autofill once I have a pattern here. So drag, and here, this part, what I'm gonna do, so to make it easy for us to read these numbers, definitely, if we have large numbers like this, this is 1/400,000, we don't need these decimals. So first of all, I'm gonna write it in a comma format and get rid of the decimal points. Here, I can call it this one KPI 1. And that was output, or average output. Okay, now I will visualize it. So I will just highlight this part, insert, and then a line chart. I'm gonna grab the line chart, so I can choose either this one or the line with markers. These ones do not work because this one, it's called stacked line, meaning it doesn't work for our purpose. We want to see, we want to compare all of them at the same level. So I'm just gonna, or this one, it's mainly just adding markers for each of these observations here. So I'll just choose the one with markers, and then we can change the title here, KPI 1. Average output per plant over the year. So in this case, I can see here that, for example, Frankfurt is consistently above all of the other plants in terms of production. Sanchem is consistently the least, but also we don't see much variability during the whole year from one month to another. That's when it comes to the output KPI. In addition, what we did, because sometimes we like to keep our, as I mentioned, sometimes we want to show our numbers on our dashboards. So we created a formatted table. First of all, I'm going to copy these parts. We added here trend lines. We also added averages because we want to create a heat map that tells me which of these numbers are above average and below average, and then I'll paste it in here. So in order to make this formatted similar to the others, so I'll just highlight or click on one of these cells, format, and then highlight these two. The trend line, first of all, click on this cell and then go to insert. And then here there's the option for spark lines. or line. Sometimes this is actually expanded for you, that's fine. Just click on the line chart or line, spark line, and then here it asks you to select the data range for with the spark lines that you want to create in here. So that's my data range here up until December for Frankfurt, so D12 up to O, which is December in this case. This part here, since we already selected this cell, so it's saying B28. Click OK, and then here the nice part is you can auto fill. Averages, I'm gonna compute the average for all values for each of these plants. So let me just grab this up. Equal average, and then all of these for Frankfurt. And then we can do the same thing, autofill. Now, why did we create these averages? So that we can highlight, do conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is actually very nice, very helpful for us, because that allows us to quickly identify, in this case, for example, I want to see which of these months were above average and which of them were below average. So if I highlight the data that I want to do conditional formatting on, so which is in this case Frankfurt, and then I click on conditional formatting, the two most options that we usually use, especially in this class and in general with conditional formatting, would be highlight cells rules and then top bottom cells. I'll go over both, but let's first get the ones that are greater than so if I want to highlight the one that's above average, I would like to make sure that it is above this cell. But here the conditional formatting, it's red. Usually if it's above average, we usually use the green color. So I'm going to switch the formatting to green. And now I can see here that these months are above average and the others are below. We can repeat the same thing to get the ones below average. So less than, and then the average. I'm going to keep it red in this case because it's below average. So that should create something similar to what we see in here. So that's the same file. Let me pull for KPI 1. So you can repeat the same thing for each of these cells separately and compare it to its average in here. Now you can create KPI 2 in the same manner. So technically we did the same thing, and then finally the radar chart, to create this radar chart which gives you which tells us a little bit about each of these KPIs at once. So here, for example, this chart was mainly telling us about KPI 1, but it's telling us how it's changing over the year. For the radar chart, we can, which I will show you in a bit how to create it, it helps us to see how each of these plants are doing on each of these KPIs. So for example, if you want to read this radar chart, we can see like on this dimension, KPI 2, which is the raw material cost, the highest, which is in here, that's going to be Frankfurt, followed by the gray, which is Mexico, orange is Gary, and finally Sanchem. So that's the highest, that's the lowest, and so on. So it's easy to see all of the KPIs in one graph. So how did we create this? So I'm gonna go back to the data, but hopefully, you have all of these KPIs. Insert, pivot table, okay. And then here I'm gonna grab all of my KPIs and make sure that they are in rows. So it's all of these in here. I'm gonna switch to average, all of them. Again, it's not every time we need to do average, depending on the question. Sometimes the question asks us for the total. Total meaning you keep it as sum. Sometimes it asks you how many. This means that you keep it as count, right? So this was not changed to average, and so on. And we want to see how these averages are actually doing, or these KPIs are doing among these different plants. Now, what we did here, I will grab this information, paste it in here. Let me save this part. And what we did, if you remember, when we created the radar chart, if I highlight all of that and then I try to create the radar chart here, it's going to be under this waterfall. If you scroll down, this is the first radar chart. This radar chart, it's going to be harder to understand or to get information from it, because these values are very, like, we can't compare 100,000 to a 0.98 or 75 or 1,000. So we need to scale them in a way that we can easily see what's happening on this graph. So what I will do, I will delete all of this information, and then I'm gonna start scaling them towards like some number, like could be 100, could be 10, it could be 1,000, but let's say I want to scale them to 100, something close to what KPI 4 is at. So in order to make this close to 100, all I have to do is just divide B5 by, in this case, 1,000 to get it at closer to 100. 1,000. So that's 104. This means that we are recording this in 1,000. It's just a matter of representation, so nothing has changed. The same thing would go for B6 divided by, in this case also I will divide by 1,000 to make it close to 100. Again, this would be measured in thousands, right? And then the third one, since it's all close to 1,000 here, right? So I will just divide the B7 by, in this case, 10, right? If I divide it by 10, that will make it closer to 100. So all I have to do is just add a 0 or tens. And this one, since it's close to 100, so I'll just keep it as it is, B9. Oops, this is B8. And this is, now B9, I will multiply it by 100 to make it closer to 100, all right? And then you can autofill the rest. So that's the same radar chart that we see in here. All right, so again, it's a matter of scaling, not a like we're not interested, like you know, if you if for example, let's see, where was my sheet? This one. You can see here, like if you want to read these graphs, that's in thousands. So if I read this one, this is 100,000 and so on. All right, and finally, to create the dashboard, we just copy and paste all of these charts in here. And if you want to refer to the discussion of, you know, what could be done with Applicum based on this dashboard, please refer to the lecture video which we did in class. Thank you.